At what point in the business were you like, okay, we're running all the sales ourselves. We should probably scale up our sales team at this point?
Just like if it isn't built into workflow, it doesn't count. If it's not repeatable revenue, it's a different class of revenue. Maybe you can use to invest in other things, but isn't something you want to scale. So really being intellectually honest about, do we have repeatability? Can we train someone that is a smart person and a good salesperson, but knows nothing about our product and industry, and get them to work in the systems? Making it repeatable is, do we know specifically who we're selling to, how we get to them, what we do once we've gotten their attention, how we convert them, and then how we retain them over time.
Prem, pumped to have you on the podcast today. Prem is the founder and CEO of Humanly, and he's built an incredible business in the recruiting space. So, thrilled to have you here. Excited to learn about everything that you've built. Yeah, pumped to have you.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm excited to chat.
Cool. So let's start from the early days, right? Humanly has been around for a bit. I think you guys were well ahead of the curve in terms of where the market was going. So you clearly had some really strong vision. So I would love to learn kind of about the early days of like how you decided on the recruiting space, and what kind of early indicators validated that this was the right idea to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is primarily in product, and I've spent a lot of time in HR tech product, but really it's, about starting with the problem and being obsessed with the problem. So I had an experience with the problem when I graduated from college at University of Washington. I was applying to all these companies, never hearing back. And then when we did get interviews, it just seemed like I would compare notes, and one of my colleagues would be asked a completely different set of questions, completely different interview than me. So it just felt like a process that was pretty convoluted. And then as I worked in recruiting tech and HR tech at Microsoft, I found that it wasn't that the people were just trying to make it unfair or ignore candidates. They just didn't have the tools to engage at scale. So that's kind of how I, decided. And then, of course, went into a lot of research and market analysis to see if there is something to be built here at a venture scale.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So what did like the first MVP look like? Like what was the first problem that you tried to tackle?
Yeah, so we were trying to get as quickly as we could to getting something in people's hands. So the very first thing we did is we thought that chatbots would be good for automating initial candidate screening. But instead of going out and building one, so in the very early days, we signed up for this startup program with a company that uses chatbots for marketing and sales. And we basically said, hey, can we white label this and test it out and see if people want to use it for recruiting? So before we wrote any code, we wanted to really, really validate that people wanted to use this and it would solve the problem that we set out to do. So that was MVP, was actually not even something we built. And then obviously from there, we've gotten really deep in building our own product.
Yeah, and I think that's a good takeaway. Like even for companies like ours, like, we're a year into the journey, the ability to test the market without having to build a ton of product that you don't know if people are going to use or not is like such a great way to jump in and validate. So once you like got through the validation phase, right? It sounds like you white labeled this product. How did you identify like the highest leverage piece that you would kind of start building internally?
Yeah, good question. And this was very much the early days. Really, one piece was just talking to a lot of folks that were TA leaders, recruiters. When I say being obsessed with the problem, oftentimes you'll get ego if you start building something, you want people to like it. So we really wanted to not build anything until we knew. So a bunch of customer interviews and taking recruiters to coffee every day and identifying where their pains were. We did a lot of shadowing. And then we looked at kind of just the market opportunities. So did some research to do the TAM, the SAM, is this big enough? And we found that, in high volume recruiting specifically, about $7 billion in the US is spent a year on very repetitive tasks. So that was part of the validation as well.
Yeah. And I was checking out the website. I read a couple of your case studies, and it seems like you guys have done a really nice job of breaking into the enterprise. Was that kind of the goal early on? Did you start enterprise first, or did you start SMB and move upwards?
Yeah. So when we first had an idea before we built anything, and I'm coming from generally bigger company, I didn't really. I had a ambitious vision, so we wanted to build something huge that solved everything from recruiting to internal mobility to onboarding to. And I very quickly, like in the first 3 months, realized how important focus is. The old saying, startups don't die from starvation; they die from drowning. So they drown in ideas. So focus is really important. So and focused on who we were selling to is also important. So trying to, even if you're not right on the ICP, but it's hard to learn when you're selling to everyone, right? So I think picking one initially, and we carried this through until we really landed on the ICP in the market segment, but. So early on, we were trying to go like direct to enterprise. And this was around like 2021, and we realized that the buyers that really needed our product at the time were generally mid-sized companies doing high volume recruiting, high turnover, and then as the product evolved, we realized that hey, we've built something that will solve problems at an enterprise scale, which of course comes with all the SOC 2 and ISO and just being ready even from that standpoint to meet all the compliance needs and other needs of enterprise, were other things we need to figure out.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point, right? Like a lot of startups die from drowning rather than starvation. So one piece of it, of course, is like the ICP that you're going after. It sounded like you started, mostly mid-market. From a product standpoint, what problem did you go to tackle first, or did you build in a way that allowed you to tackle multiple problems at the same time?
Yeah, so when we did the research, so I personally talked to about 300 or so TA leaders and recruiters, and then there's obviously a lot you can read online that are put out from a study standpoint. But it really seemed like the biggest pains were around scheduling job candidates, and then also engaging with everyone that comes in. So since we're on a revenue podcast, I'll give a metaphor with sales. If I were to tell our marketer to drive like 1 million demos per month, but sorry, our sales team only has time to demo one customer a month. That's kind of like what's happening in recruiting. You have thousands of candidates raising their hand because they're interested in your product, your company, your employer brand, and you're just engaging with a small set of them. So the engaging at scale and screening was one thing, and scheduling was the second. We decided to start with the engaging and the screening, and then eventually got to scheduling.
Cool. So how did you tackle that problem, right? Like, it's clearly a huge problem, especially for popular companies, mid-market, companies that are scaling really quickly. They have a ton of interest from, potential employees. Like, how did that screening process work, and how did you guys build that engine?
Yeah, so we kind of started from the point of view that if I had 100 people and I was trying to find out which one of those people would be the best for this role, I probably wouldn't just talk to 5 of them and then decide who's the best out of 100. You'd probably want to talk to everyone. And really, that was a philosophy we had. So engage with everyone that raises their hand, or that you source out externally, and then they raise their hand that way with interest. Talk to everyone, and then go through the process of filtering it down so humans can spend the time on the most qualified. So that was one kind of guiding principle from our research. And another one was, an outcome for every candidate. No one wants to be ignored. So can we do this screening in a way where we're adding value back to candidates? It's not just the company screening the candidate, but the candidate getting their questions answered, screening the company. And if they're not a good fit, maybe they're put on a silver medalist list for later, or maybe they're suggested another job. So kind of like in sales, we're trying to help you. We're not trying to help you fill a role, but we're trying to help you build a pipeline. And so treating it like that. And then we also saw in marketing and sales, you had Salesforce, which wasn't good enough at engaging at the time with prospects. So outreach came out. Outreach wasn't good enough at helping with two-way conversations with prospects. So Gong, Drift came out. So that's really what's happening in recruiting tech right now. We're kind of going through that similar transition.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So with that in mind, right, you identify this problem, you identify the market you want to tap into. What did it look like of standing up the initial customer base? And particularly, like, when did you feel like you had that first aha moment with a customer that you were like, okay, like we're onto something here?
Yeah. So taking you back to the days when we were talking about white labeling, so about 2020. So we went through Y Combinator at the time. COVID hit, so there's a lot of just folks waiting and seeing, and there's layoffs. It was just a crazy time. But coming out of that, there were folks that wanted to do more with less and wanted to optimize. And we had a customer, an accounting firm here in Seattle that was one of our first customers, and they're our first mid-market customers. So we were kind of experimenting with a lot of smaller scale companies, but this was the real deal. High applicant volume. It was everything we wanted in our ICP. If they're listening to this, they might hear this for the first time, but it was like literally up until we did that first launch, and I think like 2020, where we were like, is this gonna work? Is it gonna? And it did. And we obviously, like, coming from Microsoft and working on enterprise products at scale, we made sure that we crossed all our T's and dotted our I's, but we weren't 100% sure that the pain would be solved in the way we wanted it to. And we were also surprised to learn other things. Like, it wasn't just the making the list smaller, but getting the candidate to the right spot in the applicant tracking system was a manual effort with a lot of margin for error when humans were doing it. So I think that also helped us realize that there was a lot of the smaller things that really created a good customer experience that we hadn't accounted for.
So I take it you probably integrated deeply with some of the main ATS systems to be able to automate some of that process as well.
Yeah, I think with a lot of these like B2B apps, if it's not in workflow, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really exist. So that was a key piece from the beginning. Like, how do we don't want to create some new workflow for you. Maybe eventually we'll move in that direction, but we need to start by meeting you at where you're at, which to us was integrating with the applicant tracking systems.
Yeah. So fast forwarding a little bit, right? You've gotten this aha moment. You're starting to more deeply integrate into these systems. At what point in the business were you like, okay, we're running all the sales ourselves, like we should probably scale up our sales team at this point?
Yeah. So to me, I think just like if it isn't built into workflow, it doesn't count. If it's not repeatable revenue, it's a different class of revenue. Maybe you can use to invest in other things, but isn't something you want to scale. So really being intellectually honest about, do we have repeatability? Can we train? We obviously were in 2020, we're still doing founder sales, and that's not scalable, of course. So can we get someone that is a smart person and a good salesperson, but knows nothing about our product and industry, and get them to work in the system? So is the system sound? And we tried that, didn't work right out of the gate, and then we started to learn and grow and build. So I think the big thing to me is like, and making it repeatable is, do we know specifically who we're selling to, how we get to them, what we do once we've gotten their attention, how we convert them, and then how we retain them over time. So that was certainly a journey there.
Yeah, and I think that's a journey that, a lot of early stage founders, like I would even consider us in this bucket, we're still doing 100% founder led sales, right? It's like, when do you decide to bring on the sales team, and, like, what metrics do you look for? What kind of process are you looking for? I think some folks have a revenue mindset, right? Like, we want to get to a certain amount of revenue before we hire a salesperson. Other folks are in the camp of like, we want to make sure that we have a really repeatable process. Like, what would your advice be to kind of like a founder that may be kind of nearing that crossroad?
Yeah, I don't think there's a right way to do it. I mean, but in the sense that this doesn't always work, but if you're hiring like an entry level salesperson before you have repeatability, which is a fine way of doing it, but it's a different type of person. So you want someone that is there to learn, iterate, build, test, document, not just make a bunch of money out of the gate. So you also have to comp them in a certain way. So you can kind of go in both directions. So I think it starts with just being really honest with it's not enough to have a really cool product people want. And certainly we've seen a lot of like product led growth and things like that. But when you're selling to mid-market and enterprise and B2B, you certainly do need a method to the madness. It's not all going to be, I mean, there's examples, but generally speaking, you kind of have to have the playbook. So the advice is just be really honest. It's so easy to just think that, oh, this is a great product, anyone can sell it. And to us, it was less about like demoing it. It's more how you get their attention. So are you going to be able to send, hundreds of these outbound emails, or however you're going about outbound? Do they have the discipline to do that? And then can you close? So those points at the beginning and the end to us needed to be repeatable for us to have success. Yeah. And I mean, founder-led sales is like, it also shouldn't be necessarily looked at it as a bad thing. It just, there's a certain time frame where if you do want to scale this, you need other people to be able to sell. And
yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice, right? And like nuanced, right? Some people are very much in one camp or another. I think it's good to have a nuanced approach. So with that in mind, and I think that's a great segue. Like, what did the process of acquiring clients, right? You've got your initial clients. I'm sure you use your network and referrals and the ability to kind of tap in. But what did it look like once you went from network-based selling to, really like outreach and generating pipeline and being able to do it in a scalable way?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is saying no, because you're going to have customers that are not an ICP, but the ARR bookings is tempting, and so being able to just be like really definitive. And I think having, if you're going down the venture route, having investors that are there for you in that regard. Our investors, Drive Capital, are all about doing it this way in the sense of they were okay with, yeah, we could probably sell to anyone and start getting some short-term gains. But if you're thinking big picture, you need this to scale. So those are two things. I think just having everyone on the same page and not like pretending like you're focused, but not really, like actually just really doing it and being hardcore there. So I think that's important. And everyone needs to be on the same page there across founders, across sales folks that you hire. I'll stop there, but I could go on.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, having investors focused on the same kind of goals that you have, right? Obviously, that's an early conversation and a foundational conversation for the business. What did pipeline generation look like for you? Like, how did you go out and acquire new business?
Yeah. So I can speak to kind of, I guess, the phases of the journey. So early on, it was very much like hand-to-hand combat. So we're not running like campaigns at scale. It's us as founders just reaching out, and obviously using the network where we can. But that also doesn't scale as much. As we got further along, we having an ICP made everything easier in this regard. So because the group of companies, there's like 17,000 in the country that we would sell to that are in our broader ICP, and then you kind of have an even smaller one. So we have account lists of maybe 20 are on the account list, and you're really finding out where these TA leaders hang out, what conferences are they going to, and you start to see a pattern. So like if we're going after these groups, this is generally the events we should show up at, generally how we engage with them. So LinkedIn was better than email, which was better. LinkedIn was actually better than phone as well for these particular buyers. So you kind of have your channel strategy. And then you also know what are like those 1 to 2 to 3 pain points that are really important to those buyers. So I do think like ICP made pipeline gen a lot easier. More recently, the best things for pipeline gen from our standpoint. So, because we're in a relatively new space, we're letting some of the leaders educate the market on the space. So we haven't spent a ton of money on brand, but inbound and getting SEO right. Now there's the AI SEO. So you want to show up in the not just the Google search results, but the top summary. So kind of getting that down. But from an outbound standpoint, it's really been events and specifically micro events. So we'll show up at most of the industry ones from like a brand standpoint, but the events that have been best for us is these kind of experience-based. We'll do like a local event in a city where we're doing like a sound bath. Something we found that a lot of these TA leaders are parents, and getting them out to just a dinner when they're not going to be with their kids is probably not that exciting. But can you do it a little earlier? Can you do something that they wouldn't have ordinarily done? And then also piggybacking off of other events. So Seattle Tech Week was an event in Seattle that we knew a lot of people that we'd want to sell to would be at. So we then created an event that happened like right after it. So that has helped a lot in terms of pipeline gen.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So it really sounds like a lot of in-person networking and perhaps like utilizing LinkedIn, email, et cetera, to drive engagement on the in-person channels. Are there any tools that you guys have used specifically that have been really helpful in the pipe gen process, whether it be for targeting or finding different signals, things like that?
Yeah, we've used a lot of tools. Ample Market is one that we've had some success with. And we've used tools like Sendoso for gift giving, tools like Gong, more so like the analytics side to then decide what our messaging and outbound might look like. I think the most and we've used dialer apps. We just didn't have a lot of success over phone. That might be different in different industries. But we tried to use tools that either help automate the volume of outreach or automate how much we can learn from each outreach. So that's kind of been how we've been going about it. And I think like as you're thinking about ICP, and we, as you make the group of people you're selling to smaller, you can also get much more targeted by hitting them with a message that will really resonate. LinkedIn, I mentioned, has been good. So we're using tools like Dripify to automate LinkedIn type cadences. And
are you guys producing a bunch of content on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, we are. We're not. I wouldn't say like our play is like extremely high volume, but what we're trying to do from a brand standpoint, we definitely want a LinkedIn presence from on our page. We want to. I'm doing. We're finding that like founder and CEO led messaging around product improvements and new features we're launching get a lot of engagement. So I'm doing a weekly post on new features we're launching, and it's exciting to see too, because you have a lot of audiences you hit with that. You have buyers, you have customers, you have investors. So you get kind of a good bang for your buck. So kind of letting people into the journey. Like I found that software of old, you kind of go build something for a year and pop out on the other side and see if people like it. SaaS allowed you to really build with your customers, iterate based on feedback. And some of this AI revolution has made it so like the customers are literally on the same side of the table with you. And you can, I wouldn't use the word customize, but you can create like curated experiences without writing a bunch of code. So you can actually custom build in a way for customers. So I think that is like sharing our journey on LinkedIn has been really important, because we find that these buyers are not buying a product, they're buying into a journey, and they want to see that journey growing. So
yeah, I think you're spot on. And this is like, I've had, hundreds of conversations with, go-to-market leaders at, earlier stage companies, even at later stage companies. And I think like this trend is coming fast, right? Like email channel has become somewhat unusable at this point. Like really maybe for awareness, it's okay, but it's been a really difficult channel to convert on. The channel that seems to be working best is like creating content on LinkedIn, getting people to engage with the story, and then creating a real process around how do you engage with those folks, in a respectful way, right? It's like, look, hey, if this person's engaging with 1, 2, 3, 4 of your posts, there's a very good chance that they may end up wanting to chat with you. They just didn't reach out themselves.
Yep.
And those are like not traditional signals that, most, I would say, more, more legacy type brands would look at, right? Like a brand that like Salesforce, for example, like how much are they looking at Benioff's posts and using that data to go out and acquire new business or to upsell new business. And I think that's like a really strategic advantage for companies that are earlier stage and can be more nimble.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's still true that people want to buy from people, and LinkedIn allows you to help with that.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit, right? So we've talked about kind of the earlier stage of Humanly. At what point were you like, hey, you know what? Let's go attack the enterprise market. And how substantial of a investment was that before you were able to prove it out?
Yeah. So and to kind of share like where we're at right now, enterprise is still like fairly new. We've been going after it for, we probably have about a year and a half that we've been hitting it in a little different way than before. But a lot of our enterprise right now is inbound versus us strategically going after outbound, and that's changing. We actually just hired someone I'm excited about, an enterprise rep. Did an onboarding with today. But so as far as what we found, and it is, I would say, like if we're talking about focusing and not drowning, not all products necessarily can work for mid-market and for enterprise. So what we found with the set of things that we're doing to a certain segment of enterprise customers, it was the same product. It was just a much deeper pain because they're doing more volume. So I think in our case, generally customers that are around 1,000 to 10,000 employees can gain a lot of benefit from this. So when we started going after enterprise, it was a little bit, I think, different process. So how we engage, who we're talking to is different. There's RFP processes come into play more so. So it wasn't just us going outbound, but are we on the RFPs we want to be on? Partners were a big part of this. So we're continue to be really excited about our partnership with SAP, with SuccessFactors. So I think being able to be a value add on top of some of these more established businesses is a great channel as far as rev share type scenarios. Even from a trust is a big thing. So as a startup selling to enterprise, people like, it's hard to gain trust anyways as a startup. But then when you're working on AI, there was a Tideo study saying 83% of companies in the US want to use AI, but only 27% fully trust it. And I haven't seen that since cloud computing, when we were selling cloud to enterprise who didn't quite trust it yet. But when you have those two trust barriers, one is the technology you're working on, the second is being a startup, it's hard. So that's where, working with partners comes into play. Also, getting ahead of safety. So we're audited by a third party on bias in AI, and we're trying to be like the safest tool out there, but also being able to deliver on the promise we have. So those are some of the kind of things that change a little bit, as well as who's doing the selling. Not everyone. It's a different type of, obviously, motion there. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, like longer sales cycles, right? And building trust, getting through procurement. With that in mind, right? Like just from an industry perspective, recruiting is a particularly interesting space, right? Because there's typically a really large level of inbound traffic, especially for enterprise and mid-market businesses, of folks that want to go work there. How much of this role do you think will be automated versus, human in the loop, or do you think it will be mostly an augmentation?
Yeah, no, and I definitely don't feel that AI will replace recruiters, but recruiters using AI probably will replace the ones that aren't. And I think the role of the CHRO in the future is going to be managing a workforce of human intelligence, but also a workforce of agents. And at our company, we've kind of gone through that. So like when we're adding an AI agent to do a job, we ask questions like, is it a culture ad or not? Or what's its experience? Are we going to promote it? So I think like thinking about things like that has been an important way of looking at it for us. But to get more specific as I think about it, we're like where I think recruiters will be, like when people come to Humanly, generally it's because they want to make an impact. And if we can use AI to give employees a greater impact, that's where we want to be. So to specifically answer your question, in high volume hiring and to hiring in general, yeah, there are several things that I think should be automated. And one is when you have these high volumes of folks coming in, and in our tool, it's not just inbound, but it might be people plugging in their LinkedIn networks. So now you have employees that might be connected to potential candidates, and you're outbounding, you're sending out emails and SMS to get new candidates in, but you end up with a lot of people. And processing those people, to me, is something that one reason it should be automated is because right now when humans are doing it, they're only getting to 5% of those people. So if you really want to talk to everyone, you just can't do it with humans. So that part is one that I think the processing and getting to the smaller list that then a human is engaging with. I very much feel like, and I also feel like, everyone that engages, like everyone that raises their hand as a candidate should get into screening in minutes. And then you're finding out if they're a good fit. Right now, most people are ignored and the good ones are waiting a week to talk to a human. So that's a piece that a lot of room for improvement. And then on the next phase is you get to the human interview. And what we're doing, what some others are doing is can you actually help humans be better and more efficient by taking notes, writing follow-ups, giving them tips for what they could have said, kind of like Gong, to convert candidates. So that's where I see it more as like a assisted way of doing things.
It makes a lot of sense, and I think that's like a pretty accurate way of looking at it. I think we look at it relatively similarly on the sales side. I guess one thing that I'd be particularly interested in, with this in mind, right? Like, and you guys are going to continue to build and grow. Do you think that these teams will be able to do more with less? Like, do you think that this will augment the number of folks that a team needs to have in order to achieve similar results?
I definitely think we'll be able to do more with less. And, internally, humanly, we have about 5 agents that are doing things like helping us basically do more with less. I look at it as like, I do look at certain entry level roles. Like I do think that a lot of the parts of those roles should be automated, but those people should then be given, the next level up type of role where there's thinking involved. There's elements of really like selling candidates. I don't think we're like anywhere near right now turning on AI for full cycle, like exec hiring, for instance. And that's also less of a volume problem, but 100%. I think the promise of AI is doing more with less, and AI can make things happen faster, more efficiently. But you have to do it right, because it can also make bad things happen more efficiently bad if you don't have the people and process down first.
Yeah, really wise. We're on the same page with that. I think like on the sales side, right? The reality is there's a lot of entry level roles where, folks are kind of just doing mass blast outreach. And our kind of thought on the future is like, first of all, you got to be able to do more with less, but also like our opinion on the future of pipeline generation is there has to be a reason to reach out. And there's so many signals these days. I think there's signal overload in a lot of cases, but sales teams have a hard time figuring out what to action and what not to action. And so I think like the next evolution, at least from what I believe in our space, is going to be the action layer and orchestration layer. Like, how do we bring agents and humans together to work collaboratively towards a goal, and what tasks should be taken by an agent and what tasks should be pushed to a sales rep where they're going to be uniquely qualified. So it sounds relatively similar in some ways. Shifting gears a little bit, and I found this interesting when I was doing some research on Humanly. You guys acquired Teamable. Would love to learn about kind of the reasons behind the acquisition and kind of what the goals were with that acquisition as well.
Yeah, no, coming from Microsoft, I've been around a lot of acquisitions. When we acquired LinkedIn, one of my roles was how we bring like the data and use cases into some of the other products at Microsoft. And I've seen, what it looks like to be super acquisitive. Obviously, 1,000% different when you're a Series A startup, and somewhat counterintuitive in the sense that these can be really distracting and not just from a product integration, but culture, and you're bringing new people. So we went in with that in mind. So to make this decision, it would require us being super convinced that it was the right decision and that our plan was sound. And in getting there, the great thing about what I was mentioning with partner strategies is we're also going in with companies like Teamable, like CRMs, and going into deals together. So we're already building integrations and also knowing when we see the RFP, how much are they getting, how much are we getting, and where it became kind of a math thing where Teamable was already like it was very easy to integrate because of our product working well with CRMs. So that made us feel good about it. And really for us, and particularly with mid-market buyers, also with enterprise, but we didn't want to, like we were able to solve the kind of making the list smaller, but a lot of our customers also wanted more candidates on the initial list and that getting more reach. So having a tool that had a database of about 600 million candidates and ways of engaging with them helped us from a channel strategy standpoint. The other thing I'll just say, and this might apply to sales as well, but one thing that we feel we're fairly unique in is we don't want buyers to have to buy one recruiting tool for chatbot, another one for SMS, another ATS, another one for video interviewing, another one for phone automation. We think that anytime you're having a two-way conversation with a job candidate, it should be one tool. And then you have your ATS, which is better for candidates, better for AI and data. So we've been building channels. So we started with chatbot. We then built SMS. And Teamable was the email channel. Now we're looking at phone, and we'll announce some stuff next week on the phone channel. So really, we want to be in all the channels, and then the kind of intelligence that we built, our AI models, are what powers those channels. And we might say, for this job, here's the template. You can press go. It'll first do a chatbot, then it'll send them an SMS, then it'll get to phone. For this other role, won't start with a chatbot. It'll go maybe right to human. So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Really interesting. I worked at Klaviyo before starting First Touch, and very similar, right? Like any type of communication that should be happening with a customer should be happening on the same platform. So you have clear attribution, you have a clear visibility into the customer journey, and then you can use data to inform what the next best action or next best step might be. So I spent 4 years of my career selling Klaviyo, and yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I think that's exactly what the future of communication is going to look like, is one central place where it's done, and the ability to really communicate across all channels with one central database. So with that in mind, like, I guess curious what the future of Humanly looks like. It sounds like you've got an exciting announcement coming up, maybe in the next week or two. But what does the next year or two look like for Humanly?
Yeah. So when I think about that, like really, we're going after impact, and we have a bunch of different ways to measure that. So we of course have our operational metrics, and we're on this high growth path, looking to continue that. So can we grow our customer base and our ARR base? But more importantly, on the impact side, so we're part of it is finishing up the vision that I talked about. So can we get in the rest of the channels? So the next one that we'll talk about on LinkedIn next week is phone. So where are all the places candidates are talking, and how does Humanly get there? Data is really important to us, and having data independence where we're getting direct data from candidates, where if you kind of think of the systems of records as where data goes to die, where data is created is the actual conversations you're having directly with job candidates. So can we give more value back to those candidates, such as career coaching agents, or help in like doing mock interviews via an agent? So there's a set of things we'll be doing there, because over time we want the Humanly candidate profile to be the better than like a static LinkedIn profile where half of the users will update their profile like 1 to 2 times a year. We wanted them to be live. So forming relationships with candidates so they have a reason to update their profiles and add to our database, and then continue down building the channels for recruiters to communicate with candidates. Those are two of our goals. But at the end of the day, we want you to just be able to sync in a job or tell our AI about a job and have a qualified candidates on your calendar the next day. And we'll be growing the team, so this could change, but we're certainly looking to grow the product engineering as well as the go-to-market team in the second half of this year quite a bit.
Nice. For anybody listening to this that's interested in what sounds like an awesome sales gig, check out Prem and Humanly. We've got probably about 7,000 folks in my network that are sales folks. So, hopefully, if you're hearing this could be a great opportunity for you. But Prem, really appreciate the time today. Like, so awesome learning about Humanly and the way that you've built your business and the way that you've thought through so deeply, like all of the components of your growth, but also the way that you've scaled the go-to-market side. So I just want to thank you for taking the time today. It's been awesome getting to know you and awesome learning about your business.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate the conversation.